What we're talking about is three levels of searching going on here. We know where the plane took off, we know where it was headed, we know where it disappeared, and now we know in these search areas where they found debris. We also know that particularly in these stormy conditions that there are very strong currents out in here that have to be considered in terms of what they've done to that first layer of search, the surface layer. And let me explain why that makes a big difference here, because if you're talking about the surface of the water in an area where you have a lot of wind blowing and a lot of currents at work, everything up here obviously can move around hour by hour by hour, and the lightest material, the things they found so far, can move the most. It serves a purpose because it helps point you below the water, but as soon as you move down in this column of water, that's when you start encountering all these different currents down here, which can move anything that's suspended between that top, say 80 to 100 feet above the floor. It can move things around in here, so they have to reverse engineer where the currents were and what they did between that material they find on the top and what they really want to find, which is down on the bottom here. Because down on the bottom is where the flight data recorders will likely be. It's where you would find the cockpit, where you would find the wiring. You're probably going to find significant parts of the fuselage down here, the wings, the tail, the engines, each about 9,000 pounds. Those are the critical parts, Jake. It's important, of course, to recover the bodies here for the families and for whatever evidence that also brings. But all these physical parts of the plane, they're at the bottom. And that's the third layer of searching here, where you have to have side scan, sonar, and robotics, and divers, and everything all coming together to dig up everything they can down there, Jake.
But Tom, with all of these conditions, like the currents you mentioned, how much can the search and rescue teams reasonably expect to find?
I think reasonably they can expect to be very successful at this. I want to remind you of something. This is about the same sort of conditions that we had with TWA-800, which crashed off Long Island in the 1990s. In that case, it was about 100 feet of water. The search went on for months, but after 10 months, they had recovered every victim, and they recovered 95% of the plane, Jake. That was critical, because when you have all of that, you can put it all together and you can see where fractures occurred and what possibly went wrong and what went right and how the plane actually came down. That's the evidence they need. They found it in TWA-800 with very similar circumstances. In this case, if they're lucky and the clues point the right direction, they could have the same thing happen.